Hello everyone, welcome back to Magnifico Recaps. Today we will narrate a romantic sci-fi movie called The Space Between. Spoilers ahead, so proceed with care. Let's begin. The Space Between Us describes the story of a teenage boy, Gardner, who is born on Mars and whose mother dies in childbirth. He falls in love with a teenager girl named Tulsa and uses her help to track down his father who lives on Earth while he's dying as his body cannot adjust to Earth's gravity. In the first scene of the movie, an extremely rich businessman named NATHANIEL SHEPARD is giving a speech to a gathering about his goal to colonize Mars, and the attendants clap after he ends his speech. He announces how his company Genesis Space Technologies is going to be sending a team of 6 astronauts to Mars to begin living there. He introduces the gathering to the team of astronauts, which is headed by Sarah Elliott. She answers a few questions asked by the press and how delighted she is to go on a trip. The crowd is let out, revealing that they're near the space launch while the astronauts make their way to the ship. The spaceship takes off successfully and can dock onto a Mars transfer vehicle that'll lead them to Mars. While Nathaniel celebrates the team's success on Earth, the astronauts buckle down for a long journey ahead of him. Sarah begins vomiting on board and one of her fellow astronauts asks to talk to her. Nathaniel is informed that Sarah is pregnant, and they decide to let her remain on board until she gives birth and bring her and the child back. Nathaniel refuses the plan and asks them to keep the child on Mars and cover up any information about Sarah's pregnancy from the press. Sarah decides to go through the pregnancy, and they reach Mars with her 9 months pregnant. They go to the built colony where she gives birth to a baby boy successfully, but she begins to suffer seizures and dies soon after. The entire procedure is watched by Nathaniel on Earth and is shocked at her death. Nathaniel attends a meeting where they discuss how the child will not be able to take Earth's pressure and cause his heart to fail if he were to come on Earth. Nathaniel forces his executives to agree to keep the astronauts on Mars and take care of the child as he will not be able to live on Earth. Nathaniel offers to go on the next mission, but he's reminded of a medical condition that'll cause him to suffer while traveling in space. They decide to cover up the child's birth to maintain good PR and have financing to run the colony built on Mars. A disappointed Nathaniel goes walking back to his home and does a flight simulation where he crashes the spaceship. The colony on Mars has successfully survived for 16 years. An android named Centaur visits Gardner ELLIOT, Sarah Elliott's teenage son, who's living in the colony. He tells Centaur to get a map of the ventilation of the colony, but the android refuses to get it, referring to Gardner as his best friend. He removes Centaur's head and gets access to the database, but needs the mission number, which is the password. He checks footage from the mission's last meeting on Earth but is interrupted by a message online asking where he is. Gardner rushes from his room and goes to a lab where he meets Kendra, one of the original astronauts on the ship. Kendra tells him to fix the irrigators, making him indispensable, but he asks her how he can be indispensable when no one knows about him. He goes back to his room and looks through the ventilation maps of the colony. He sneaks into the vents and reaches a file room where he takes his mother's file and belongings. Gardner finds a wedding ring and a USB in her belongings. He plugs in the USB to his computer and sees a photo of his mom with a man, finding a video of them at the house near the beach. He thinks the man to be his father and prints a photo of them together at the house. Gardner gets a message from a girl named Tulsa who lives on Earth and goes to high school. They chat and video call, where he tells her he lives in a penthouse in Park Avenue and suffers from osteogenesis imperfecta. She scoffs at his claims and he asks her about her foster father, revealing she's an orphan in the foster care system. She ends the call with Gardner disappointed he can't go anywhere. He watches a German movie with Kendra where he speaks in German and explains the plot of the movie to be about an angel falling to Earth. Back on Earth, Tulsa rides her motorbike back to her home, where her foster dad, Chuck, is drunk in his sleep. Tulsa wakes Chuck up and forces him to do his job of flying a small aircraft, spreading water on fields. On Mars, Gardner wears one of these spacesuits and goes to visit his mother's grave. He begins to drive the lander rashly and ends up crashing with Kendra, saving him. They return to the colony where Kendra shouts at him for improper conduct, but he goes to the room in danger. Kendra tells him that his mother is not buried on Mars, but was taken back to Earth, where her ashes were spread in the Pacific Ocean, and leaves his room. Nathaniel is informed about Gardner's misdeeds and has a meeting with Kendra via video. She explains that Gardner is extremely intelligent and he's becoming restless with no human contact and should be sent to Earth. Nathaniel refuses as Gardner will require carbon nanotubes installed in his bone due to different densities on Earth and may even die on Earth and refuses to do it. While Gardner is fixing the pipe in irrigation, Kendra calls him, telling him there's some news. Gardner is informed of the operation involving the carbon nanotubes, and he goes ahead with the operation, even though Nathaniel has disapproved of it. Gardner tells Tulsa about his operation and how he'll be visiting her in a few months. Gardner begins undergoing training and therapy, learning about social customs and culture. He finally leaves Mars, with Kendra accompanying him back to Earth. Gardner asks Kendra if they can visit his father and asks who his father is, but she claims not to know. Nathaniel discovers that Gardner and Kendra are traveling back to Earth on the same ship that brought them there and demands to meet Gardner when he comes to Earth. The space shuttle lands successfully on Earth and he exits it, finding himself euphoric. He's taken to NASA, where medical tests are run on him and he's kept in quarantine. Nathaniel visits Gardner and introduces himself, and they share a conversation about Earth and Mars. Nathaniel meets Kendra, and at a meeting, Nathaniel asks them to run a test in Gardner's blood for troponin. Kendra wakes up and asleep Gardner and explains that the doctors need to do more tests, which makes him angry. After she leaves, he disables the machines and leaves his room, getting shoes that'll help him adjust to Earth's gravity. Kendra and Nathaniel discover him gone from his quarantine room and close the area down, but before they can find him, he changes clothes and collects some money. Gardner escapes through the loading bay, sneaking to a truck leaving the establishment. Nathaniel and Kendra begin a search party to find Gardner, who escapes from the truck and meets a homeless person, finding out about the bus that'll take him to Colorado. He experiences rain for the first time and gets on the bus to Colorado. Kendra and Nathaniel travel in a helicopter, where Kendra tells him about his only Earth friend named Tulsa, who lives in Colorado, expecting Gardner to visit her. Gardner reaches Tulsa's high school and meets her, but she slaps him, angry that he ghosted her. He tries to explain about his long trip, but she leaves as her next class begins. He follows her to a class where he's made fun of by the rest of the class. After class, Tulsa asks Gardner where he's from, and he answers Mars, which she takes as a joke. He shows her a picture of his mom with a man and explains how he wants to find his father. Tulsa takes him back to her home, where she leaves him in the yard, and he's approached by Nathaniel and Kendra, asking him to come home. Gardner refuses and explains that he wants to find his father. Gardner runs away and reaches a field where Tulsa is sitting in her foster father's airplane. Kendra runs after Gardner, but he gets on the plane and they fly out of the area. Gardner experiencing his first flight. Kendra and Nathaniel chase them in a helicopter, but the airplane begins losing pressure and Gardner and Tulsa jump from it before it crashes. They leave the area while Nathaniel and Kendra are told that Gardner was not on board the plane, surviving the crash. Kendra and Nathaniel fight as she thinks he's being too controlling of Gardner, while he blames Kendra for bringing him to Earth. Tulsa and Gardner steal a car from a dealership and decide to drive to the house in the photo. While driving, Tulsa asks Gardner who was chasing him, and he explains how he comes from Mars, but she thinks he's joking and lying to her. Gardner explains that he's from Mars, and she calms down when he promises he will never lie to her. They go to a diner where Tulsa uses a tablet to find out about Gardner's mother ELLIOT, and using the wedding ring inscription can trace the person who married his mother and father, Shaman Neka, and decides to visit him. Kendra and Nathaniel use the police's help to find Gardner, but find another boy and girl, which makes Nathaniel desperate. He confesses how he feels extremely guilty about letting Gardner live on Mars. Kendra receives a call informing her that he has high levels of troponin. Nathaniel explains how it means Gardner's heart is enlarged and can't survive the Earth's gravity, implying he will die soon. Gardner and Tulsa drive to Arizona and stop to a store, changing clothes. Tulsa plays on piano and Gardner admires her musical ability, leaving with some necessities. Kendra and Nathaniel can track them to the store using its video footage and find out they're going to New Mexico. Gardner and Tulsa have a meaningful conversation where she opens up to Gardner and they share a romantic dance under the stars at night. They kiss and sleep together, with Gardner admitting that he loves her. The next day, they find a woman who tells them where Shaman Neka lives and visit him, but are unable to find out anything about Gardner's father. Neka tells them that he made the ring, which was paid for by Sarah, and they find her address on the bill. Tulsa finds out the address is in California, but Gardner begins having nosebleeds. He doesn't tell Tulsa, and they leave to go to California. While on the way to California, Tulsa takes a detour to Las Vegas and shows him the sights in the city. Gardner begins suffering from social anxiety and he gets nosebleeds, fainting on the road. Tulsa takes him to the hospital where the doctors discover his heart is enlarged, and Tulsa realizes that he wasn't lying about being from Mars. While Gardner is unconscious, he promises to find his father, but when Gardner wakes up, he explains he knew he wouldn't survive on Earth and just wants to meet his father. Understanding his need, Tulsa helps sneak Gardner out of the hospital and they continue their journey to California by jacking another car. Kendra and Nathaniel are informed of where they are headed and catch a plane to California. Tulsa drives an ailing Gardner to California, and they find the house from Sarah's pictures. They meet the man, and Gardner introduces himself as Sarah's son, but the man becomes hostile. Tulsa confronts him with a photo and explains that he is Sarah's brother. She sees Gardner going to the beach and tries to stop him from going to the sea. He explains how he wants to choose to die in the sea, where his mother's ashes were immersed, and kisses Tulsa before falling in the water and attempting to drown himself. Kendra and Nathaniel save him and bring him to the shore, where Nathaniel admits that he's Gardner's father and married Sarah secretly. They immediately take Gardner on a spaceship and fly into space outside of Earth's gravity to remove the pressure in Gardner's heart. Nathaniel takes over command of the ship and rides it into space, where they are successful in reaching space. Gardner stabilizes, and Tulsa tells him to go back to Mars, but he refuses to live without her. She explains how she will manage to come to Mars for him, and they kiss. The ship lands back on Earth, and an expedition is prepared to take Gardner back to Mars, with Nathaniel accompanying him. Tulsa is adopted by Kendra, who stays on Earth, and Tulsa aspires to be an astronaut to visit Gardner one day. In the movie finale, we see her undergoing training after graduating high school, and Gardner spending time on Mars with Nathaniel, his father.